Greetings one and all. Hope everybody had a meaningful fast on Yom Kippur or Yom Kippur, as they say in English. We are on the 13th day of Tishrei. You got it 2 days before the holiday of Sukkot. And believe it or not, I was not sure until this morning if this class would be a reality, because I wasn't really expecting to give it, but I thought it was close, and if I maybe gave it a couple of hours, so I got up really bright and early. Actually, it wasn't too bright outside. It's actually dark and early, and with Hashem's help, I was able to swing it. So we're here. So let's give it a roll. Today's class, with God's help, the year 5782. Welcome to the new Jewish year. Okay. Today's title is Sukkot, parenthesis. In English they call it the festival, the Feast of Tabernacles. Feast of Tabernacles. Uniting with all religions and nations, question mark. Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles, uniting with all religions and nations, question mark. Okay, now this is a biggie one, because in the last few decades, Sukkot has become kind of a universal, international, one religion type of holiday. So we've come here to dispute that and show how wrong and how far off this thesis really is. This is really messed up, because we will see the opposite is true. Okay, so let's take it from the top. The Jerusalem March. Jerusalem March actually began in the year 1955. I think it was 3 days back there. It was a march into Jerusalem. I guess you have to be in top shape. 1955, you have to be in good shape in order to make the 3-day journey up to Jerusalem. For decades, this was a Jewish March festivity. Unfortunately, the Christians jumped on this bandwagon big time in 2003, 18 years ago. And when I say big time, I mean big time. You don't really see too many Jews left in this Jerusalem March. It's just takeover. And it is really a terrible thing for those that take life seriously and investigate and look beyond the headlines. Try to understand. This by no means, though they claim to be a march for the sake, in support of Israel. Actually, it is exactly, tell you exactly how to explain this march. There are two sides of Esav. We know that when Esav can, he comes to battle against the Jewish people via force, war, Holocaust, inquisitions, pogroms. When that tactic does not work, they come in the name of love and their smiles. And it's a verse in the Torah. Save me, Hashem, from my brother, that's love, and from Esav, hate, atrocities, tragedies, murder. That is exactly this march. If you want to just sum it up, this is the Esav angle of brotherly love. I will, Diana Ross said it best, killing you softly with my love. Remember that one? That was the Goldie. That's really what it is. They hand out candies, their smiles, wanting to gather up the Jewish people to the land of Israel in order for their false Messiah, JC, to convert all Jews. Very convenient. All Jews back to Israel, and this way we won't have to work hard. It's all compact into one. Here's our chance. This will be the greatest conversion of all time in Jerusalem, in the land of Israel. We will convert to JC all time. But in order to reach that milestone, we must show love and money, because money talks. Now, why is this march, why does it take place on Sukkot? Now, this is based on a verse in Zechariah, the prophet Zechariah 14:17. There he writes that the nations that will not come up to Jerusalem in the end of days, they will be punished, and they will receive no rain, no blessing. So once again, we will see, as the class progresses, we will see how this verse has been really bent out of shape totally. But you know our verse, you wreck 'em, Christians, we fix 'em, Jews. This is also based on the Torah. The Torah also tells us, not just the prophet, but the Torah teaches us in chapter 28 in Numbers, teaches us about the sacrifices that were brought by the Jewish people on the holiday of Sukkot, which included 70 bulls. And you all know that we are big Chicago Bulls fan. The Talmud in Tractate Sukkah 55b explains that these bull offerings, these 70 bulls, connected, parable to the 70 nations of the world, were brought for the nation's sake. That's what the Talmud tells us. So, once again, we do see a connection between the nations and the Jewish people on Sukkot. We saw it in the prophet Zechariah. We see it in the Torah in Numbers 28. And we will see, as time progresses, we will see in history this connection. So there is definitely a connection between the Jewish people and the nations or religions of the world and the holiday of Sukkot, definitely. But today we will clarify, it will be clear as day, the true connection. Not what it has become, the joke that has become the Jerusalem March. Okay, it says in Yalkut Shimoni, in the book of Vayikra, paragraph 651. It tells us the following. It says, we all know that not only the Jewish people are judged on Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the Jewish New Year, but also all the nations of the world, all people of the world are judged on Rosh Hashanah. So, our sages tell us in this Yalkut Shimoni that from Rosh Hashanah until Sukkot, there is a judgment going on in the heavens between the nations of the world and the Jewish people. And we are not certain who will be triumphant. And the sign of victory comes during the holiday of Sukkot, when the Jewish people raise high their four species, including the highest of the highs, the Lulav, the palm branch. Our sages tell us that in war, how do we know which side is victorious? They didn't have back then, Fox or CNN. How do they know the results? So whoever lifted up their weapon up high, that was a sign of victory in battle. So too, the Jewish people raise up our palm branch, our lulav, with the other species. And our sages tell us this is our victory announcement. Dida Natzach, we are victorious. So we see very clearly that this time of year there is a gigantic, a super judgment that is taking place in the spiritual worlds between the Jewish people and the nations of the world. Who wins and who loses? On Sukkot we see that the Jewish people are victorious. On Sukkot we see that the nations of the world have lost. No time for losers, because we are the champions of the world. The Tikkunei Zohar says it the best. Tikkunei Zohar 24, chapter 24. Listen to this amazing. When we shake our lulav, last year I did a class, shake, 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 shake your lulav, shake your lulav, shake, shake, shake. Yeah, check it out. Anyways, the Zohar says when we shake our lulav, this symbolizes the toppling, the fall of the 70 nations of the world. Amazing. So when you're shaking the lulav, remember the power that we have in our hands. When we shake the lulav, we decide in this judgment who is victorious, the nations or the Jewish people. And by taking the four species and shaking them, we topple the 70 nations of the world at the time of Sukkot. So far, we see very clearly that Sukkot is the time of defeat of the nations, of a separation of the good and the bad. Not a unification, not uniting with evil or religions. This is amazing. Although the Gra tells us that Abraham performed the commandment of the holiday of Sukkot, the booths, but black and white, the first time we see the expression Sukkot is by Jacob. After surviving the White House, the house of Lavan, for 22 years, he survived, though Lavan tried to uproot and annihilate Jacob, was unsuccessful. And after meeting up, 36 years after after running away from his brother, Jacob running away from his brother Esau, 36 years. Because Jacob hid for 14, and then he was at his father-in-law Lavan, the White House I like to call it, for 22 years. So 22 plus 14 equals 36. So 36 years after being separated, Jacob meets up with Esau, and Esau wants to join forces together, reunite, and live together with Jacob. However, Jacob says, time out on the court. We'll meet in the end of days. Yes, we will. Time of judgment. We'll meet in the end of days, but not today. And he tells him, we're not going to be living together. We're not going to be uniting. And where does he go? The verse tells us in Genesis, in the portion of Vayishlach, it says that before Jacob, after surviving Lavan, after surviving Esau and refusing to unite with Esau, where does he go to? He goes to a place called Sukkot, black and white. Because Sukkot exemplifies a separation, a disconnect between us and the nations. So Jacob was disconnecting from Lavan, 22 years, disconnecting from Esau. That is the first private sukkah built that we see. By the way, this idea, it's not my private idea. I saw this amazing idea that we just said in a book called Vayomer Eliyahu on page 979. How about, that was the first private sukkah. What was the first national sukkah for the Jewish people? Now, the first national sukkah came the following. Here's how it played out. The Jewish people met up in Egypt in a city called Ramses. And from Ramses, they went to, the next stop was Sukkot. This can be found in the end of the book of Numbers, at the beginning of the portion of Mas'eh. It tells us that after Ramses, the Jewish people encamped in a place called Sukkot. And the amazing commentator, the Yonatan ben Uziel, the top student of Hillel the Elder, tells us in two places that when it says the Jewish people encamped in Sukkot, we are talking about that this was a time where the Jewish people were given the booths, the 7 clouds of glory protection. In two places. The first in Exodus chapter 12 verse 37, and also once again in the book of Numbers, portion of Mas'eh, chapter 33 verse 5. Tells us straight out that this is when the Jewish people received. So this is right after the Exodus out of Egypt. This is still in the middle of the month of Nisan. This is happening. Now, the Rab Chaim Vital, the prize student of the Arizal, writes in his book Eitz Hadat Tov on page 77. He writes the following amazing commentary, that when the Jewish people met up in the city of Ramses in Egypt, they were greeted, quote unquote, so to speak, by the multitudes, millions. They were larger. The nations that came to convert in the time of Moses, at the time of the Exodus of Egypt, were more than the Jewish people. There's two opinions in our sages how, but they were many times more nations, multitudes that converted than the Jewish people themselves. These multitudes were accepted by Moses without the consultation of God. And we are paying the price. We are paying the price thousands of years later, till this very minute, second, of suffering by what we call the multitudes, or in Hebrew, it's the Erev Rav. This, Rab Chaim Vital, folks, put on that seatbelt. He tells us in black and white in his book that the idea, when they came to Sukkot, just like Jacob previously, when he comes to a place called Sukkot and he builds these Sukkot, these booths, this is a sign of separation. A sukkah separates the Jewish people from the nations of the world, not unites, not combines. So, this was God's message to separate the Jewish people from the multitudes. Because let me tell you folks straight out, you know, if you saw 10 plagues, 10 miracles, you saw all of these miracles in Egypt, you too would convert. So you don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be the whiz kid in order to say, well, let's jump on the bandwagon of the Jewish people. Man, well, this is in, this is hip. We all want to be hip, so this is it. Got to be Jewish. So, it doesn't take a big genius, and it's not such a great person that converts in such circumstances. No wonder that Maimonides writes in his Code of Jewish Law that we do not accept converts during times where times are great for the Jewish people, like times of David or King Solomon. When times are good, you could have a lot of friends. When times are bad, that's where you see who your real friends are. Okay. So, the Jewish people are traveling various journeys in the desert, and it comes to the 17th day of Tammuz. Once again, 17th day of Tammuz. Jewish people left Egypt on the 15th day of Nisan. So this is 3 months later, almost to the date. 3 months later, Moses comes down with the 2 tablets, and there he cannot believe his eyes. The people of Israel are dancing around the golden calf. Dancing around the golden calf. Moses takes the first set of tablets and lets them loose, Bruce, and they break. This was on the 7th day of Tammuz, and that's why we fast every year. The first tragedy was the sin of the golden calf. The sin of the golden calf, dear friends, was incited by who else but the multitudes of nations that had converted via Moses. They were the ones that instigated the Jewish people, which is an amazing, because the Jewish people are, as we said, for the last 3 months, they are in their separate, I can call maybe today quarantine, you know, it's the language of our day. They're in quarantine, free from the influence of the Erev Rav. However, when it came time to leave the clouds of glory to those booths and to receive the Torah, and 40 days later to receive the tablets, the 2 tablets, the 10 commandments. That short span of time was enough to influence the Jewish people once they got out of their protected clouds of glory. That was enough time for the multitudes of nations, the Erev Rav, to influence in a negative way the Jewish people and cause them to sin. The Jewish people were almost annihilated because of this sin. Moses had to intervene there fast. Okay. Now, the Holy Gra on his commentary on Shir HaShirim, in the 2nd chapter, 17th verse, Song of Songs, he tells us an amazing question and answer. Did we ever think, I mean, this is a popular question asked in Jewish law, but if you think about it, it's like so obvious. We celebrate the holiday of Sukkot. The nations call it the Feast of Tabernacles. We celebrate it in the month of Tishrei. We are now in the 7th month. This is the beginning. I think in a day or two we begin the autumn-fall season. Summer is over. So, why in the world are we celebrating the Exodus of Egypt? Now, when we left Egypt, we are thanking now, 6 months later, we are thanking God for the protection, for the booths, for the clouds of glory, the 7 clouds of glory that God gave us when we left Egypt. We should be celebrating this holiday of the booths 6 months before, just when we celebrate Passover, or Passover should be when we sit in booths, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. What in the world is the holiday of Sukkot doing at the beginning of the autumn season, 6 months after the Exodus of Egypt? So only the Gra could prophetically have come up with this one. He comes up with the following: that after the sin of the golden calf, the Jewish people lost the 7 clouds of glory. They lost their Sukkot. That continued from Tammuz through the middle of Av, through the middle of Elul, for 3 months. The Jewish people were without the clouds of the 7 clouds of glory for 3 months, which is an amazing thing, because it's measure for measure. God gave us, when we left Egypt, He gave the Jewish people a separation between us and these multitudes of nations, these so-called converts. He made a separation. He gave us these clouds of glory to separate us. When we failed and we mingled and joined forces with the nations, these multitudes, these converts, when we fused together with them, 3 months later, on the 70th day of Tammuz, and we made the golden calf a form of idol worshipping, God took away from us this divine protection, separation. And it only came back. When did it come back? We know that God forgave the Jewish people on Yom Kippur. 3 months later, God forgave the Jewish people. The reason why we celebrate, it is not a day of sorrow like the fast of the 9th of Ab, when we commemorate the destruction of the temple. It is nothing like that. It is a day of joy. There are no greater days of joy, the Talmud tells us, than the holiday of Yom Kippur, the fast of Yom Kippur, and the 15th of Av. So God forgave us for participating in the sin of the golden calf. So if He forgave us now, what do we receive in return back? We receive what He took from us because of the fact that we did not utilize this separation, this protection, these clouds from these multitudes of nation converts. Because we didn't utilize it, He took it away from us. And now, because we repented, now we utilize it, He gives it to us back. So, on the following day, after Yom Kippur, when God has forgiven the Jewish people, Moses commands the Jewish people on the 11th day of Tishrei. He commands them to start bringing gold and silver and copper and materials in order that we will build the tabernacle. Yeah, it's interesting. The nations call it the Feast of Tabernacles because it's really connected. The Sukkah is really connected to the tabernacle, to the Mishkan. Interesting. So, now, it says for 2 days, so that was on the 11th of Tishrei. On the 12th and 13th day, the Jewish people brought supplies and materials in order to erect the tabernacle in the desert. On the 14th of Tishrei, 1 day before the holiday of Sukkot, Moses says, enough is enough. We have enough to suffice in order for us to build the tabernacle. He told people to stop building. The next day, the 15th, which is the holiday of Sukkot, the process of building the tabernacle began, and the clouds of glory, the 7 clouds of glory, what we call Sukkot, the booths, returned to the Jewish people on the first day of Sukkot. So now it's understood. Even though this holiday is a holiday remembering the Exodus of Egypt, that was taken away from us. The clouds of glory were taken away from us after we sinned with the golden calf and only returned during the first day, on the first day of Sukkot. So therefore now it's clear why we celebrate the holiday of Sukkot 6 months after the holiday of Passover, when we left Egypt in the first place and we needed the protection of the booths. Okay. By the way, I always thought until this morning or this evening whenever I got up, I always thought that this was an original prophetic idea of the Gra, but I learned today that this is written black and white by, once again, Yonatan ben Uziel, his commentary on Shir HaShirim. Once again, chapter 2, verse 17, he says straight out that he tells us that the Jewish people once again returned to the 7 clouds of glory on the first day of the holiday of Sukkot. So we got it. Next, we know, based on a verse in the prophet of Micha. Micha writes in 7:15, chapter 7, verse 15. He tells us, just like you saw when you left Egypt, the miracles and the wonders, the fabulous things that you noticed, that you witnessed taking place in Egypt, they will return once again at the time of the final redemption. Ki meitzetcha me'eretz Mitzrayim areinu niflaot. There are many more sources to this, that if we want to understand more on our redemption, look into the redemption of Egypt, because they are going to be very, very similar. So we have the following. In the book, the Shochar Tov, our sages write, in Shochar Tov, chapter 48, verse 19, on Psalms. So our sages tell us that it says that God, the verse in Psalm says that God will encircle the Jewish people and Zion. So Rav Nachman tells us what was will be. Just like the Jewish people left Egypt, as we said earlier, and were placed in clouds of glory, the 7 clouds of glory, Sukkot. So too, when the final redemption will come, I will once again place the Jewish people in Sukkot, in these booths, in these 7 clouds of glory. Amazing. The redemption will be similar. Next, in the book Torah Mincha, the third discussion. This is a book by a student of the famous Rashba. He writes the following. Tells us, just like when you left Egypt, you were surrounded, God surrounded you with 7 clouds of glory. So too, when I will remove the Jewish people from exile and remove them from being subservient to the nations of the world, I will do it via the clouds of glory, via the Sukkah. So, folks, amazing story that we're going over here together. We see that the prophets speak about the end of days and the connection between the Jewish people and the nations and the holiday of Sukkah. It's all coming together. Because just like the first redemption began through God giving us, God's grace giving us the 7 clouds of glory, the Sukkah, so too will be in the final redemption before the coming of the Messiah. Once again, there will be a similar, just like the Egyptians chased after the Jewish people after they left Egypt, the 70 nations coming after the Jewish people up to Jerusalem, also in the final redemption, also during the time of Sukkah, for the final clarification, for the final separation. We see Rabbi Hai Gaon. That's not like Hai Gaon, it's H-A-I. Rabbi Hai Gaon, he was the last genius, we would translate it into English, he was the last genius of Babylonia. He was the head of the Talmudic seminary of Pampadita. And he lived 1100 years ago. The way the Torah plays out, we know that we have in the Talmud, we have the Tanaim. Later generations became the Amoraim. After the Amoraim, we have the Savoraim. And after the Savoraim is the Gaonim, the geniuses. So this is the 4th period of the oral law being given over to the Jewish people. So Rabbi Hai Gaon writes that he received from his rabbis, so this is even further before 1100 years, that the last battle between the 70 nations of the world and the Jewish people will take place, will occur, you got it, on the holiday of Sukkot. Amazing. Hit that grand slam, Rabbi Hai Gaon. Now Rabbi Hai Gaon, his words were brought down in dozens, perhaps hundreds of books, but we'll give earlier books that brought this down, that this will be. Because, folks, very unusual but peculiar, if we look at the prophets that we read on the holiday, the first day of Sukkot, we see very clearly, what are we talking about? We're talking about the last battle. The last battle between the Jewish people and the 70 nations, otherwise known as Gog Umagog. So, very clear, you know, it seems like it's right in our face that yes, why are we reading this Haftorah? Why are we reading the prophets on Sukkot talking about the final war between the Jewish people and the nations? Because it's going to happen during the time of Sukkot. This is brought down by giants such as the Rokeach, by the giant Avudraham, by the Torah in the Code of Jewish Law. Look it up, 490, Orachaim 490. So we see, very interesting, yes, this is a meeting. Sukkot is a meeting between the nations of the world and the Jewish people. It does take place on Sukkot. But it's not a time of unification, of uniting, of becoming one world religion. Not at all. It is a time to destroy all false religions, beliefs, and evil. That is the meeting. That is the grand meeting that is taking place. And folks, looking before Rav Hai Gaon, we are told in the tractate of Avodah Zarah, page 3, side A, in the end of days, the Gentiles will come and complain to God, why are the Jewish people being redeemed? Why not us? So God explains, the Jewish people observe the 613 commandments, and you didn't. Remember that on Saturday Night Live? I think it was, I'm Chevy Chase and you're not. So that's, you know, God's telling them, listen, the Jewish people, they observe my law, they observe my Torah, my commandments, and you don't. It's as simple as that. So the nations say, you know what, God? You're right, but give us another shot. Give us one commandment. Now we have a lot of commandments, folks. But God specifically, once again, He gives us which commandment. You got it. What a great guess. You're batting 1,000 today, folks. Sukkot! God says, okay. Once again, this is amazing. From the time of Jacob, when it came time from Jacob to separate from Lavan, his father-in-law, to separate from the evil brother Esav, all these family, you know, we are family, you know, yeah, all these family members, the nations of the world, separation, as we saw when it was time for us to leave Egypt. We left with the multitudes, millions of them. God pulls out what? Sukkah, time for separation. After this sin of the calf, when we were influenced by the multitudes, what's it time for? Separation this time. And let's do it right this time. Folks, the final, as we said, just like in Egypt, will be the final redemption. And the final test during the final redemption will be giving the Gentiles one commandment. The commandment of building a sukkah. So they go and they, you know, boom, 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 build up that sukkah. Yeah, they put up those huts and put on those palm branches and they get in, you know, they turn on the radio. Actually, they don't have radios anymore. They turn on their dumb phones and they hear that, you know, it's going to be 43 degrees Celsius, you know, 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh my God. And they get in there you know, and they're used to their air conditioned, their AC houses and their homes and their cars. They go from their air conditioned homes, they go right into their air conditioned offices and their work, and they come back and they go right, and they don't know what's going on outside. But now there's no escape, folks. You're in these huts, and it is so blank hot in that, hey, hot in those huts. Maybe that's why they call huts, because it's so blank hot in there. In those huts, hot. So, and they just can't take it anymore. You know, they're sweating it out, and they go out of that sukkah, and, you know, like Kung Fu, Bruce Lee, you know, one of these, boom, one of these like karate kicks, and, you know, they take down those huts. They failed the test. That is the final test. The Jewish people are redeemed, you lose. That is the final test. Folks, this is an amazing concept. If we look according to Jewish law sources, amazing, I'm just giving a few of them. When it comes to the holiday of Sukkot, how do we relate to the nations of the world, to the people of the world? Once again, is this a uniting, one religion, coming close, or separation between truth and false, between the Jewish people and the nations? Separation. So, are Gentiles allowed in a sukkah? Yeah, we're talking about those boards and those, you know, those sheets around, physical, the real thing, the real McCoy today, what we have, not the clouds of glory. Those simple huts. Are we allowed to invite Gentiles inside? So, the Shach on the Torah, on page 444, writes not to bring in Gentiles into your sukkah. Kaf HaChaim, the Jewish law book for the Sfaradim, the North African Jews, 600, Orach Chaim, chapter 639, law 6. Rav Chaim Falajis, Moed Kol Chai, writes to us in chapter 20, paragraph 26. The question and answer, Q&A, Divrei Yatziv, second volume, on Orach Chaim, 274, chapter 274. Do not bring Gentiles into your sukkah, as the holiness disappears, and the righteous guests curse them out. Once again, these are not the words of the Divrei Yatziv. The Divrei Yatziv, dear friends, he is quoting the Zohar Kadosh in the book of Leviticus, in chapter, the portion of Emor, and he says that the divine presence rests on the Sukkot of the Jewish people during the holiday of Sukkah. And if anyone brings someone that is not from the Jewish nation into their Sukkah, the 7 guests, the 7 Ushpizin, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and David, they all leave. There must be 50 ways to leave your Sukkah, you know? Slip out the back, Jack. So, and not only do they leave, so once again, if we bring in a member of the nations of the world, we bring them inside into our sukkah, that chases away, number one, the divine presence. Not very good. That chases away the 7 guests, 7 ushpizin. Not very good. But not only that, the 7 righteous guests that we have, the ushpizin, curse out that person for doing such a thing. We even take it, folks, a step further. The Yehudah writes that one should try their best. The Yehudah writes this. It's brought in his book Kaf Echad, on the 24th chapter, the letter Samech. He writes the following: it is best not to have your sukkah built. Folks, we were talking about a minute ago, we were talking about to dwell, to invite somebody inside. We're not talking about that. We're talking about building. But at least, he says, not to have the top, the palm branches, not to have that put up by a non-Jew. And that is brought down in many books, that if you have no choice and a Gentile builds you a sukkah, that is fine, but a Jew must build the top, because if you think about it, why is a sukkah called a sukkah? Only because of the top. The top is called schach. That is, those are the palm branches, those green palm branches above us, and that is the most important part of our sukkah. The sukkah is not called on the walls. The sukkah is called on the top. A very ancient book called Kav Yashar. The Kav Yashar, his rabbi was the Yesod Yosef. The Kav Yashar brings down his rabbi in his book Kav Yashar on chapter 77. He says the following: that if a person brings into their sukkah a non-Jew, the abundance of blessings during this time of year, during this holiday that come down on Sukkot, will not be coming to that person who brings in a Gentile to their sukkah. So, once again, we're not talking just about, lofty Kabbalistic ideas. We're talking about Jewish laws. So we see, very interesting, that Sukkot is a holiday of separation, of victory of the Jewish people. We spoke at the beginning, the law, the judgment between the nations and the Jewish people begin on Rosh Hashanah and goes. When is it finished? It's finished on Sukkot. What day of Sukkot? It's finished on the 7th day of the Sukkot, the last day of the Sukkot holiday, as we will see in a minute. Folks, this is an amazing story. Listen to this. Rabbi Chaim Falajis, in his book, Nefesh Kol Chai, on the letter Kuf, the paragraph is 10. He tells an amazing story that there was a Jew that was brought to trial somewhere in the world outside of Israel by a Gentile government. Rabbi Falajis advised this person who was on trial. Mind you, there was a death sentence possible for this person. It doesn't say exactly what they accused him of, but if he was found guilty, it was death. Rabbi Falajis, Rav Chaim Falajis, advised this person every day read the sacrifices of the 70 bulls that were given by the Jewish people for the nations of the world on Sukkot. This appears at the end of Parshat Pinchas in Numbers, chapter 28. Read it every single day. Why? Because if you look at the order, dear friends, of these bulls, the first day we bring 13, the next day, second day of Sukkot, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, the last day, the seventh day of Sukkot, Hoshana Rabbah, we bring only 7. Why? We know that spiritually, spirituality and holiness always goes up, increases. Why here are we declining and decreasing in holiness? We are going down. The first day there are 13 bulls. We are down to 7. Why is that? Because our sages tell us this is a sign of the defeat. This is of the demise of the nations of the world, of the religions of the world. Of course, folks, don't get us wrong here. It goes without saying. We're not talking here about righteous Gentiles. Gentiles that observe the 7 commandments of Noah. Of course, we're not talking about them. They will remain. They will remain. They have a place even in the world to come if they observe the 7 commandments because God commanded Moses. If they accept this in a Jewish court, they have also not only a place in the end of days in Messiah, but they also have a place in the world to come. We're not talking about them. We're talking about the false religions out there, the Muslims, the Christians, and the thousands of other false religions. Anyways, amazingly, this fellow, his last trial, came on the 7th day of Sukkot. Now, you can't make those things up. 7th day of Sukkot, the last day, right? This is the day of the victory. The Jewish people, there are no more bulls. There are no more bulls, besides for Chicago bulls. But there are no more bulls to sacrifice for the Jewish people. That's it. That is the end of the nations of the world. This is their end. And that day, this fellow, who Rabbi Falajis told him to read the verses in the Torah that describe the giving of the 70 bulls, the day-to-day, 1, 2, 3, until 7, the day-to-day. This is a tremendous secret. 2, if you have a court case against a non-Jew, if you have some kind of dispute, read those sacrifices. Folks, maybe we can make some money on this. We'll patent this idea. We'll make it. Hey, you have a trial. We have the formula for victory. Okay. Tzvi, man, it is so hot in here. I know that I don't want to have to break down like the Gentiles. They break down the sukkah. What happened to the AC over here? It is so hot in this hut. Yeah, by the way, if you didn't recognize it, because they changed the curtain over here, but we are in the Holy Land, the Holy Apple, on the Holy Hilltop, Tal Binyamin. That's where we are. And it was getting too hot here, and I was feeling like, I don't want to have to karate chop this synagogue down. No, just joking, we won't do that. Okay, folks, last but not least, because we're coming up to the finale here, put on another seatbelt, because we're going to, as my dear friend Tomer Devora says, we're not only going to hit it out, but that ball is going to continue traveling. Just love it. It's going to continue traveling the ball past the bleachers, past the stadium. It's keep on going, folks. We're going to hit it out now. Now, we know on the last day, we said the last day, Hoshana Rabbah, this is the downfall of the nations of the world. The evil religions, the evil nations, not the righteous 7, the Gentiles that observe 7 commandments of Noah. We're not talking about them, of course, goes without saying. So, we know on the 7th day of Sukkot, Hoshana Rabbah, the Jewish people encircle the table in the middle where the Torah is read. We encircle it seven different times. Now that is very interesting because that reminds us of an historical event. A historical event, this is brought down in dozens and dozens of books. A historical event, it happened when the Jewish people, led by Joshua, the son of Nun, came in the year 2488, Jewish year, 2488. Came into the land of Israel. The first place that we conquered was Jericho. Remember that song? Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. No extra charge for all of this musical interludes. Okay. So, 7 times. The first day, 1 time. Second day, another time around Jericho. 3rd day, another circle. 4th day, another circle. 5, 6. But on the 7th day, it wasn't 1 circle. They encircled Jericho 7 times, blew that shofar, and the walls came a-tumbling down. The walls came tumbling down. Right. Actually, they were sucked into the ground as is, but it doesn't go with the song, but that's really what happened. But anyways, so this is very interesting. What in the world is going on here? Why are we, according to the Yerushalmi, you want to know, I'm sure, where is this Yerushalmi? I'm going to tell you straight out. This Yerushalmi is in the 4th chapter of the Tractate of Sukkot, the 3rd law. And Rabbi Acha says that the reason why the Jewish people during the times of the temple would go around the altar 7 times on the last day of Sukkot was in remembrance of what happened in Jericho. But folks, something here does not fuse well. Something here does not connect well. Why? Because we know, when did the Battle of Jericho take place? It took place in the last few days of the month of Nisan. If I'm not mistaken, it was the 28th day of Nisan. The Jewish people entered the land of Israel on the 10th day. 10th day of Nisan, and the walls were swallowed up. We have to switch those words. And the walls were swallowed up. Ba-da-dum. Yeah, the walls were swallowed up on the 28th of Nisan. So what in the world are we doing 6 months later on the holiday of Sukkot, copying a ceremony that took place 6 months ago? What in the world is going on over here? But folks, this is the ball, this is the Grand Slam, this is the World Series, this is the bottom of the 9th, and just Grand Slam it. It is written, it is written in the book Yerech HaEitanim. It's a commentary on the commentary of the Sforno. On page 98, listen to this closely. He asked this question. It's asked by many. Okay, I get it. The reason why in the temple, when the temple stood in Jerusalem, they would encircle the altar 7 times. I understand that. We continue that custom today in our synagogues. Got it. But I don't understand what in the world is what is the connection between Jericho and the holiday of Sukkot. Comes the Yerech HaEitanim and many others, and he tells us, unbelievable. You know what the connection is? Because the first battle of for the land of Israel, the first war of liberation, war of independence, was not 1948, folks. No, it was in the time of Joshua. I always ask kids in my Talmud Torah, who was the first chief of staff of the Jewish army? And I tell them Joshua ben Nun. He was the first chief of staff, Jack. So, the first battle, open up your hearts. Folks, this is amazing. If you're not dancing around your house after this, I don't know, there's something wrong with you. You got to start dancing, jumping up, yelling, screaming. The first battle to liberate the land of Israel took place in Jericho during the times of Joshua, the year 2488. The last battle to liberate all the land of Israel will take place when? During the holiday of Sukkot. When specifically during Sukkot? On the last day, Hoshana Rabbah. The last battle between the Jewish people and the nations of the world, the 70 nations of the world, over the land. The battle will be over the land of Israel. Control. Over Jerusalem. Control. Who will control? This will take place. This is a continuation, the opening pitch of the first war, the first world war over the land of Israel took place via Joshua and the Jewish people thousands of years ago. The last pitch, the last battle between the nations of the world, the 70 nations of the world, and the Jewish people will take place also in Jericho on Sukkot. What's our sources? Listen closely. This is written, got it, okay. This is the Sifri, the last portion of the Torah, Vizot HaBracha, chapter 357. This is also written in the Psikta Zutrata. It's our sage's work. It's on the portion of Balak, page 130. Both these two sources tell us that the downfall, the beginning of the downfall of the nations, of the 70 nations, will occur not only during Sukkot, but they will occur in Jericho. And this you could look, if you look at Yonatan ben Uziel, on the last verses when Moses looks into the land of Israel, sees the land of Israel from a distance. Look at what Yonatan ben Uziel, he expresses the same idea over here. The final battle between the Jewish people, the separation of nations and the Jewish people, religions and the Jewish religion, the only true religion. This will take place, will begin to take place in Jericho, and it will come at the time of Sukkot, when there will be a separation, a defeat, and a victory for the Jewish people. Now this is amazing. Put on another seatbelt, because the ball is continuing. It's continuing traveling. In 1994, in May 1994, leaders in America, in Israel, and Arab terrorists got together of the PLO, and they signed what we call the Oslo agreements. And this agreement was called Gaza and Jericho first. Why was it so important for the Arabs to attain Jericho first? How about Nablus, Shechem, Ramallah, and a million other Arab towns and cities? Why specifically did they demand Jericho first? Because it says at the beginning of the book of Joshua, it tells us that the secret, the key to all of the land of Israel is Jericho. Whoever controls Jericho controls all the land of Israel. They never learned that. They didn't learn it, but inside their soul, so to speak, or soul to speak, they know this to be true. Inside their inner psyche, they know the importance of Jericho. Jericho is the key to conquering and liberating all of the land of Israel. Whoever controls Jericho controls the land of Israel. That is amazing. That is 1994. Jericho first. Last but not least, we have the Kada Kemach, Rabbeinu Bachya. Here we go. Okay, and we'll leave at this. The Rabbeinu Bachya writes in his amazing work, Kara Kemach. If you look up, goes according to subjects. The subject is the aravar, the myrtle, that we use for the four species, the myrtle, the arava. He says the following, I summarize. On the seventh day of Sukkot is Hoshana Rabbah. This is the pedestal of the holiday. This is the top. Crescendo. The seventh day is connected to the 70 nations, to 70 bulls. The encircling of the altar represents the destruction and devastation of the nations. Once again, nations, religions that refuse to acknowledge God and Torah and Judaism. Similar to the encircling of the city of Jericho. On the seventh day it fell. Once again, this encircling of the table in the synagogue represents what happened in Jericho, represents in the future the fall of the nations. When? Last day of Sukkot. In the in the times of the temple, the circling of the altar would atone for Israel, and on the other hand bring strict judgment on the nations. Very interesting. Rabbeinu Bachya says, on one hand, we have the encircling of the altar would bring a tremendous atonement for the Jewish people, and would bring at the same time a tremendous judgment and punishment against the nations of the world. This procedure will once again occur against the last of the Jewish persecutors, our exile, Edom, Esav, for all of the evil that they have perpetrated against the Jewish people. They will be destroyed. So folks, from the times of Jacob, Exodus of Egypt, future redemption, Jericho, our times, yes, the holiday of Sukkot, the miracle of the 7 clouds of glory that traveled alongside the Jewish people. It is a time of reckoning. It is a time that the Jewish people and the nations do unite, but it's a unification that brings upon a separation between truth and false, good and bad, Judaism and all other false religions. That is the holiday of Sukkot. Of course, those righteous Gentiles that remain, the prophet Zechariah that we started out with, will talk. They will come up to Jerusalem, commemorating that they were saved. Almost all the nations, the majority, overwhelming majority, were destroyed during Sukkot. Yet they remained, these special souls that observed the 7 laws of Noah. They were saved from this destruction. Every year they must commemorate this and come up to Jerusalem, come up to where the battle took place, to commemorate the fact that they were saved because of their righteousness. They were righteous Gentiles. We should have a lot more of them, and a meaningful Sukkot to all of us. I pray, we all pray, may we see the final redemption. May we see all the evil, all the false religions fall this year, Sukkot. Amen.